Hello and welcome to UnJustified, where we always cover the truth, the facts, the good, the bad, the ugly, on an unbiased and sometimes very unpopular opinion. If you're not a member of our newest channel, Unjustified Crimes, please join us over there as well. You can hit the link in the description box below. There is where we cover all of the breaking crime news. And let's get right into today's video. So as we are sitting and awaiting the release of more information from the FBI on the deaths of Gabby and Bryan, there's so many questions that still remain unanswered. Questions like, who is who? Like, who is the Laundries? Who is Chris and Roberta? What about their attorney, Stephen Bertolino? All those kinds of questions. Also, things about the evidence, like the notebook that was found near Bryan's remains, the Ford Mustang the police say gave them a starting point for their search after it was found at the Carlton Reserve. And there's still also questions that center around Gabby and Bryan. You know, we know that Gabby died by strangulation, according to the coroner. However, we don't really know what Bryan's cause of death was yet, because it's still yet to be revealed. As far as Bryan's death, there was a release by the FBI on October the 21st, and they announced that the comparison of dental records confirmed that the human remains that were found at the Carlton Reserve were Bryan Laundrie's. That confirmation came just a day after an FBI press conference in which officials announced that they had discovered his remains, a bag, and a notebook at the reserve. The remains, they say, that were found were skeletal. That included like a partial human skull, and that led to the dental records being the primary identification method. Northport police said on October the 26th that a DNA test on the remains is yet to be conducted. Now, the Laundrie family attorney, Steve Bertolino, has stated that the autopsy results came back inconclusive, and the remains are now being examined by anthropologists who experts say that this process could take several weeks depending on the quality of evidence that they have to work with. And even then, the anthropology test results may or may not give forensic examiners enough information to definitively conclude a cause of death. Now, it remains unclear whether the FBI would release that information and whether the Sarasota County Medical Examiner would announce it at a press conference, or whether it would be made public at all. First, that would be through the family's attorney. So will the FBI ever release its findings in the Gabby and Bryan investigation? Well, the FBI is known for releasing virtually no information during an ongoing federal investigation. And this is why details have been so scarce in this case from the very beginning. However, as time goes on over the years, or even maybe decades, history tells us this actually, it's more likely a trickle of information will eventually come to light through various means, such as public information requests by reporters. With past FBI-led criminal investigations, the most common information dump is during a court trial. And that leads us to this question. Will any charges ever be filed in connection to the Gabby and Bryan case? Well, as of right now, no charges have been filed in the Gabby Petito homicide investigation. The only charge in connection to this case is a federal charge of a debit card fraud filed against Bryan Laundrie. And that is due, of course, to the federal investigators believing that Bryan illegally used a Credit One debit card for obtaining things of value amounting to more than $1,000 between August the 30th and September the dates that Bryan is believed to have been driving home to Florida without Gabby. Gabby's family later confirmed that that card did belong to their daughter. Bryan has never named a suspect in Gabby's murder. Instead, he's been the sole person of interest in an FBI-led criminal investigation. If investigators determine that Gabby died at the hands of Bryan, there is a chance that charges will never be filed in her case. Another big question is, why does Bryan's parents continue to remain silent, and are they ever going to speak? Well, Bryan's parents, Roberta, they remained virtually silent since the whole thing began, except for what little communication they've had with law enforcement, and that was all in regards to Bryan's disappearance. Nothing about Gabby. They have been represented legally by their longtime friend and attorney, Stephen Bertolino of New York. Now, he has repeatedly stated that he has advised his clients to remain silent to any and all parties, including Gabby's parents and news outlets. And this was even before Bryan was missing. Now, Bertolino addressed his client's option to remain silent in a statement on September the 15th. He said, and I quote, "Many people are wondering why Mr. Laundrie would not make a statement or speak with law enforcement in the face of Miss Petito's absence. In my experience, intimate partners are often the first person that law enforcement focuses their attention in on cases such as this, and the warning that any statement will be used against you, it is true, regardless of whether my client had anything to do with Miss Petito's disappearance. As such, on the advice of counsel, Bryan Laundrie is not speaking on this matter." The public's response to Chris and Roberta Laundrie's silence has been largely unpopular. In text messages to reporters, Bertolino has remained non-committal on whether his clients will speak publicly as they continue to grieve Bryan's death. And another huge question that everybody wants an answer to is how in the world did the FBI, with its intense searches and rescues, miss Bryan Laundrie's skeletal remains and his belongings at the Carlton Reserve? Also has been brought up is how Chris Laundrie showed up on October the 20th and found his son's bag in less than an hour. I guess really the only answer that we can just halfway give to this question is, to begin with, the police did state that they welcomed the help of Chris Laundrie to track down Bryan, because he had the best understanding of where Bryan liked to hike and in the vast wilderness of Sarasota County. And during the discovery of Bryan Laundrie's belongings and the remains soon after, Chris and Roberta were accompanied by a police escort. Steve Bertolino later said that the parents walked down the path that had been searched and looked many times before. And at some point while the parents were there, Bertolino said that Chris Laundrie found a dry bag in the woods that he brought over to Roberta Laundrie, who had remained on the trail. Chris then confirmed with Roberta that it was Bryan's belongings, and momentarily after that, the law enforcement officer came out of the woods and showed Chris and Roberta a picture of a backpack. Law enforcement said that the backpack was found near remains. After the parents confirmed that the backpack did belong to Bryan, Bertolino said that the law enforcement indicated it would be best for them just to leave. Now, beyond that, it cannot be understated how much nature played a key role in the discovery of Bryan Laundrie's remains. Water levels were at a wildly inconvenient level for the federal search efforts. In some areas, it was close to chest deep. A dry spell in October allowed the water to recede significantly and reveal what was underneath. It's entirely possible that search teams were over or near the remains and the belongings in September, but had no idea due to the high water levels. But my question remains this: when the water did recede, why did they just allow the park to just open up to the public and let just anyone go in there to just have a look around? I understand his parents are the one that wanted to do this search themselves. It wasn't FBI asking them to at this time. They are the ones that wanted to do this because they knew the park was opening. Now, my question is, why not keep it closed now that the waters have receded and let the FBI go back in and research the areas that they weren't able to? if they were so dead set on spending all those intense search efforts out there with all of the equipment they were using and couldn't find anything, and there was this one area where they had been told, according to Bertolino, from the beginning that that's where Bryan would have been, then why open it to the public? Why not just go ahead and search it since the waters were down? It was so odd to me that the parents went in there, they found everything, and then you just had random people, protesters and all, and just random people walking through finding bones, and maybe it wasn't his bones, right? Maybe it was animals, whatever. Still, this should have been searched by the FBI. They had already done intense searching. So why, when the waters did recede, just open it up and just let anyone have a go at it? It just doesn't make sense to me at all. That does not. And another question, what is in Bryan's notebook that they found at the Hilton Reserve? Well, in the FBI's October the 20th news conference, after the remains were found, Special Agent in charge, Michael McPherson, stated that a backpack and a notebook were found in the same area. The mention of the notebook is noteworthy, not only because of the information it potentially holds, but also because the FBI in no way is required to reveal any specifics on the items that have been discovered. The notebook immediately became a focal point of rampant speculation, many theories, and lots of hopes that it may contain answers on the deaths of Gabby and Bryan. The initial worry was that the notebook would not be intact due to a reserve being fitted through September. However, those fears were put to rest when the Northport police said that the notebook is possibly salvageable. If the contents of the notebook are able to be read, the next question is whether they'd ever be publicly released. And unless there is a civil or criminal proceeding in this case, it is very, very possible, quite possible, we will never know the contents of that notebook. That is a fact. Another question that many people think is very odd, and they just can't really wrap their mind around, is why did the Laundrie family decide to go camping at the Fort DeSoto 6 days after Bryan returned from his cross-country trip alone? Bryan and his parents were joined for the Pinellas County camping trip on June the 6th and 7th by his sister Cassie and her family. They stayed at the waterfront campsite number 001, as confirmed by witnesses and photographs that Cassie released for an interview with Good Morning America. People want to know what was talked about on that camping trip, given that Bryan had just returned home alone without his fiancée, Gabby Petito. And at this point, we have no answers. None. A huge question that we would all love some answers to is, what did Bryan tell his parents when he returned home without Gabby? Well, we know that Bryan returned home from his trip without Gabby on September the 1st. When he returned to Northport, police said he was in the same white Ford van that the couple had traveled in together, a vehicle that was in Gabby Petito's name. It was the second time in a 2-week period that he had gone home by himself. Bertolino confirmed that Bryan flew back to Florida from Salt Lake City on August the 17th for a period of 6 days, and he spent time going through a storage unit that he and Gabby had shared. And according to Bertolino, Bryan went back to Utah to reunite with Gabby on August the 23rd. That was 4 days before she was last seen. Now, before Gabby and Bryan's road trip, Bryan and Gabby lived with his parents at their Northport home for more than a year. After Gabby was reported missing, her family begged the Laundries to come forward with any information they had. Gabby lived with you for over a year. She's going to be your daughter-in-law. How can you keep her information hidden? Now, that was a statement that the family had written, and their family attorney read that. on September the 16th. And as of right now, we still don't know what Bryan told his parents and whether or not it was even truthful. And attorney Stephen Bertolino was asked a question point blank in October, and he chose not to answer. And that question was, why didn't the Laundries return phone calls or text messages to Gabby's family while she was missing? His only answer was, unfortunately, I can't have that conversation with you at this time. It's not appropriate time to have that conversation. Okay, now to rewind to the first week of September, that was before this story was on the radar of national news outlets. His mother, Nicole, and her father, Joe Petito, said they were repeatedly reaching out to their future son-in-law, Bryan Laundrie, and to his parents, Chris and Roberta Laundrie, desperately seeking information on their daughter's whereabouts. Those calls and text messages, according to the Petito family, went unanswered. The Laundries were advised to remain silent by their longtime lawyer, Stephen Bertolino. Shortly after Gabby was reported missing on September the 14th, the Laundrie family released a statement through him saying that the family was, quote, remaining in the background as this juncture and will have no further comments. Petito's family released a response statement slamming the Laundries for refusing to help them. And then, several days later, the Petito family addressed the Laundrie again in a letter read by their family attorney, saying, quote, we understand that you are going through a difficult time, and your instinct is strong to protect your son. We ask you to put yourself in our shoes. We haven't been able to sleep or eat, and our lives are falling apart. So this brings us to the number one question. Why are Gabby and Bryan even dead? Bryan Laundrie was 23 years old. Gabby was 22. They were engaged, and they were ready to spend the rest of their lives with one another. In September, it was revealed that the couple's seemingly happy-go-lucky social media presence did not tell the whole story. Information on a domestic dispute by police in Moab, Utah was released in September. However, few domestic disputes with both parties dead weeks later. Exact circumstances of Gabby Petito's death remain a mystery, and while the Teton County coroner confirmed that she did pass away of manual strangulation, as well as the identity of the person responsible, remains unconfirmed until this day by authorities. With both Bryan and deceased, the public and their families may never have a full picture of what led up to this couple's death. So many unanswered questions that, quite honestly, we may never get the answers to. We even have the opportunity to know what was in this notebook. Well, there's a high likely we will not. Things like that generally would come out in like a trial, or a civil case, something like that. Well, there's not going to be a trial here. Both of the people are now deceased. So, and given if you believe that Bryan is still alive, either way, the FBI says no, he's not. There is a likely that there will not even be an answer in this DNA. So, this looks to be a case that may never happen. We may never get these answers ever. So this is just a little, touch on this case. I've seen many coming in on the older videos that I've made, many questions around, and hopefully this answers some for some of you. And I don't know of any more updates that we're really going to get from this. We may hear something from the FBI, the anthropologist, about the DNA. And there again, it could be elusive. It's just that possibility. So how Bryan died, we may never know how he died. We may only have our thoughts, theories, opinions. So, okay, guys. Well, thank you all so much for listening. I hope this was able to answer a few of your questions. I know for the most of us that have kept up with this case, a whole lot, you already knew all this, but there again, there is some that I have noticed that have just came into it and had questions. Hopefully this will help. Have a great day, night, evening, wherever you may be. And until next time, this is Unjustified.